I've been working on this. I started recently. I'll sort of frame up the talk. I should start with a bit of background on myself. I'm actually a realtor by trade. I've got a background in technology. I did database development in the past. Through a series of careers, I sold consulting in IT and ended up in the real estate industry. So being a bit of a geek, I got frustrated with the tools in that industry. They were old school, weren't solving the issue. So I basically decided to, like anyone who has a technical bend to them, I decided to build my own. I saw an opportunity there. So initially, my approach was, I'm going to take my industry knowledge, I'm going to find a really smart programmer, and we're going to do this thing together. So that was in probably about 2007. A lot of money, and 3 attempts later, I learned some things. And, when lessons cost money, you remember them the most. So the first attempt was in Adobe Flex, and this was before the iPhone, so don't think that I'm stupid for trying that. The writing wasn't on the wall at this point. Flex was actually, it was nice, had a lot of nice UI elements. The language was actually quite good. But, in hindsight, the bad part there was it was based on Flash Player. And I think everyone can agree now the future trend's not towards Flash Player. Then I had a .NET guy who was in love with Microsoft stuff. He talked me into trying it with Silverlight. And that was like Flash, but it didn't have any adoption. So that was even worse. And so I was becoming quite jaded at this point. One of the things I stumbled upon was Heroku, which is a cloud-based platform. They were primarily into Rails at that point. So I had a guy I met who was into Rails, and we only went a short bit into this because I had learned my lesson a little bit. And I made him sit me down whenever he was working because I was going to learn it this time, because I knew I wasn't going to quit. This is what ended up happening with the first 2 attempts. A young guy, very smart, got another opportunity, moved on and left me with a code base that I couldn't handle. So as I was sitting there learning, I decided Rails was too much for a single developer. And what I'm doing, so I guess what I would say in summary, just from a business perspective, is when you're dealing with clients, honor your commitments. There's people on the other side of that it does hurt. So when you say you're going to be in on a project, mean it and stick with it. It'll set you apart from the competition. So, I went for a period basically saving up money, thinking if I go to a consulting firm that has multiple employees and stick a big chunk of money on their laps, they'll stay interested. And during this waiting period, I discovered Wakanda. And initially, I think I saw it first when it was version 1. Version 2 hadn't even come out, and I kind of put it aside. And then when version 2 came out and I saw some of the widgets really improved from 1 to 2. I got interested, so I took a weekend and started building some stuff, and I actually made some progress. I'm just going to keep an eye on the time because I haven't practiced this at all, so I got to make sure I'm on time. So in early 2011, I really started contributing to the community. I'm the biggest mouth on the forum, so you might know me that way. But then in around June 2012, I started seriously learning Wakanda. And so October 9th, I started this application I'm going to be going through. Currently, I'm at 87 hours into it. So I've had a busy couple weeks. But what the talk today is going to be is not going to be a lot of exciting UI. I have a little bit, but as you know, that's the last thing you do. The first things you're doing is a lot of architectural things, setting up your model, setting up your data access, getting into security and these types of things. So I'm going to be showing you, again, I didn't preview this talk with anyone from the Wakanda team. This is my thoughts. And I think it's really important as a community for us to start developing what we think are some best practices with Wakanda. So I'm going to be sharing with you what I've been finding I think are the best practices for organizing your project. I'm going to walk you through some of the larger systems I've developed. I've done some good work with form validation on the client side. I'm going to be open sourcing a library that I've written for that. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, just some little things that I've found have been helpful. And I'm going to cover, probably some architectural things outside of data modeling, because there's going to be another talk on that. But what I would say is, I know they're recording everything here, is stay tuned for part 2, because I'm going to be speaking at the event in Paris, and it'll be really interesting for you to see where I'm at now and where I'm at in 2 weeks, because I'm starting to get into the UI. I think the next talk, I'm going to talk about UI deployment, and I'm going to have some beta users at that point. And that's the good part about being in the industry, is I've got a lot of guinea pigs I can access. So that'll be part of it as well. So what is my product? Basically, it's a hyper niche market CRM. So it's a CRM that not only is niche, but is directly focused on one market. There's no another market would not be interested in what I'm going to be building initially. It's a multi-tenant application, so I'm going to be having many users accessing the same data store, and and it's going to be permissions based on roles. So I'm going to have sometimes real estate agents, they're like a mini business, and quite often there's 2 or 3 people involved. So like any small business, staff can fluctuate quite a bit. So I've set up the permissions to be based on a role versus a specific person, so you can shuffle people in and out quite a bit. And I've left it flexible for new markets. Now, I've decided what I'm going for is people that are in the mode of being small business. So maybe something like my next industry would be something like mortgage brokers, sort of a compatible industry. So I'm going to do the demo of the application. Like I said, the UI is not the strong point right now, but I'll show you where I'm at. So I'll start up the server here. Obviously, this is Wakanda Studio. I think you've seen that by now. Okay, let me just put in this super secure 4-character password. So this is the only page that, I don't want that full screen. This is the only page that I actually did some design work on, okay? Everything else is going to be default Wakanda. So this is a registration page that works. And the thing I would say with it, and I'm going to show you more the validation library, is I've set it up so that I can specify a style for field forms or elements that need that don't meet your criteria. So you can fill in. I've got a couple logins here, but say for instance, I've got a password, and if it were, I'm validating against, is it too long? Do they match? And I've got a central messaging system that you can see comes up. So this is a central theme, and these are some of the things I'm going to run through. Is I'm trying to create an interface. Everything I'm doing, I'm trying to make reusable. Okay, there's nothing here. I could have gotten a lot further if I took shortcuts and if I just made it so that it works for today. But everything I'm doing here, I'm investing the time and making it reusable for myself. So I've built myself a library, and this is going to be part of what I show you. I'll log in here if I get my password right. Okay. So this is basically my setup here. Now I've got an issue with CSS and Chrome specifically that I have to nail down. I think it's because I've got a lot of debugger calls in there, but so anyways, this is working here. You can see the gray boxes here. They're actually components that are loading in. And I did that just to illustrate, because you see here, this is the real estate edition. This spot and this spot here, I'll show you in a second, can be swapped out for a different industry. And I'll show you that in the project organization section. I've spent a bit of time on manage users, and again, this is a system-wide sort of functionality. I don't want people to leave their computer on and be able to, someone sneak up to their laptop and make someone else an admin, so I put in a little dialog that makes you confirm the password, and if you get it wrong, it sets the value back. And this is all done in a modular way. Say, for instance, I try and delete the account owner. You can't delete the account owner. You get a message. If I make some changes and close the window or the tab, I'm getting a dialog, a confirmation. And these are all set with variables, so this dialog that I'm making is consistent. So I can either close the tab or cancel. So this tab interface, I know tabs and widgets in general are going to improve a lot. I've made it here where I'm actually creating tabs on the fly, and behind the scenes what this is doing is it's actually, see I got a debugger there, is it's actually creating a component in that tab on the fly. So I can open up, and this form's not done, but now you can switch back and forth, and I've got the close here. Now, has anyone been through the Learning Center and read my tech note on the client-side event system? This is a really powerful library that you should look at. It's a generic way for you to define an event and have multiple areas of your application respond to it. And a lot of the events that I'm doing here are working through this library, so I'd recommend you read that tech note. It's part of the library that I'm going to be open sourcing.
What was the library again?
It's whatever I want to call it. It's called Creating a Client-Side Event System. That's right in there. So I would recommend, it's a little bit beyond the basic level, I would say. So I'm going to log out here. I'm going to log in as a different user. And you can see now, Dave is part of a different edition. So what I've set up here, and I'm going to go through that now, is I've set up trying to keep myself, where did my presentation go? Here it is. Keep myself modular so that I can expand in the future. So when you're organizing a larger project, there's some key areas you want to focus on. I think I'm a big proponent of keeping yourself organized as you code. I think it makes you more efficient in the long run. You make less errors. Folder structure is a big one for me. Where you're embedding and including your JavaScript files can make a big difference. Naming conventions. I think these are all things that as a community we need to come together on and kind of, obviously parlay off what's in JavaScript already. But there will be specific things to Wakanda that we'll want to, come to terms on and make it standard so we can read each other's code better. I think the free-form model is essential for organization, and I'll show you that. In fact, what they showed in the keynote today is awesome. I'm probably going to have to rewrite this already. So, version control gets built in is what it looks like is happening. I use Git in the command line right now. I don't even put these demos together without Git anymore. It's a way for you to rewind back to a point so you can be a lot more experimental, you'll learn faster, and have a lot better experience. I avoid hard-coded strings in my code as much as possible. When you see a component loaded here, I've put that in a variable, and I'm going to show you about namespaces, but I put them in a variable because if I want to change my component structure later down the road, or if I want to change the messages in my dialogues are all in variables, I don't want to go find that in my code. I want to have one file where I can find it, and you can do language translation. You can do a lot of things by keeping them in a centralized place. And you want to also strategize how you're going to lay out your web components. So using your web components strategically is important. Web components provide more than just a dynamic in and out layout and interface. That's a big part of it. But they also provide reusability. So, for instance, my login component is used in a number of different places. It gets reused, and it makes less work for me. It also provides access control. You can either allow people to see certain interfaces or not. And then it also provides scope. And this was a big part of how I thought about YAP initially. This is sort of a diagram of how the components work in that app that I just showed you. The blue part there, it was basically the full page. And that's where I loaded either the registration or the app. So you're either in or you're out, and everything's contained in that component. From there, I have a login component, and I have two main sections here in a splitter. The navigation view, and inside of the navigation view is an industry view. So depending on the industry you're in, you'll have a certain segment that is consistent, and I only have to put together once, for instance, a global search, but there would be different areas in the navigation depending on the business you're in, and I can put different views in. I also segmented it into view levels. So I've got, and I'll show you that in the folder structure, you can have an industry, and you can have an advanced view, a basic view, and these will all load in based on the user's preferences. In the main body there, I've got the tabs, same setup with the dashboard, and an industry-specific dashboard. So when I bring up a contact, if I want to go to, say, mortgage brokers as my next, I've dominated real estate, I'm a multimillionaire, time to move on to mortgage brokers. I just make new views, and it's easy to go. So that's how the components are set up. JavaScript namespaces. And again, what I'm doing here is trying to explain to you the areas I found were most helpful to understand when going beyond the 30-minute blog, the very intro stuff. A namespace in JavaScript is a way of, global variables are bad. So what a global variable is basically anywhere in your application, this variable is available, and you can pollute it. Okay, so you can unknowingly set values, and it's easy to make mistakes. So what I do here, this is what you would do. I'll show you where I embed my files. Actually, I'll do that right now. Let me just get to Studio. Okay, so let's do the file structure. So I've got, obviously, the first thing here is I have a model folder. And this is, again, have many people worked with the freeform model yet? This is what it looks like. It's not rocket science. It's much more manageable because if you see here, I've got, 10 or 15 classes. That becomes a pretty monolithic JavaScript file script for you to manage. So you've got advantages in source control because you've got it broken down into individual files. The other thing is it's a lot more readable. You can break it up. So I break it up by the class, but as you grew, you could. I don't have a zoom. Does anyone know how to change the text size in Studio?
They were actually using the Mac. Right. There's a window on the right.
Here? Okay. Oh, bigger font. Oh, so it's Control plus.
Command plus.
Or I'll just do it with the menu. You tell me when it's big enough. I don't know. I didn't talk to them. Like I said, Okay. Like I said, I didn't talk to anyone. I was supposed to, but I didn't. So, is that good? Better? More? Okay, so anyways, I'll do this while I'm talking. So here what I'm doing is this creates an account data store class. And then so the way that JavaScript works is for me to create what I was looking for here, which is model.accounts.methods, where I want to create my data store class methods, you first have to create model.account. So it all starts at model.js, where the base level model object is created. Then you create the account level, then you create the methods level, and you're into writing a script just like you would anywhere else. I'm not going to cover the freeform model much. It's something you definitely want to learn. There's a one-page document one page in the documentation. Really explains it all. There's going to be a little more complexity with what they showed this morning, but I would recommend definitely look at that. So I've got a model folder with all of my data store classes. I've got a scripts folder, and required.js is an important file. This is where I'm creating a namespace for my application. I've got CF. So now when I create CF, any variables that I want to create that I'm using throughout my application are CF dot something. Okay? So you can see here, this isn't the best place. So okay, we've got required.js is on the server side. I've set up a personal library. I call it WacLib. So Wakanda library for the server side. And I would say that is start building your personal tool chest, create a library for the server side and a library for the client side, because they're different things and you put them in different places. So that's where I put that on the server. Then we've got our web folder. In the web folder, I put a components folder. You can name it views, you can name it components. And I break it down into, when you're loading web components, it doesn't matter where it's stored. So you put this organization what makes sense to you. I've put it into ones that are sort of more generic to the application. So my major views, my dashboard, my registration, my tab view. And then I've got a folder for common. Now, I should say in here, data class objects. This was sort of another major section. So you put a folder within a folder, and it's all keeping myself organized. This common folder was things like things I use all the time, like the confirmation dialogues and common elements that I just use. There's more utility elements. The industry folder, this is where I'm keeping industry-specific layouts. So if I go into the RE code, which is real estate for me, I've got the dashboard there and the navigation. And in the general one, which was the business version, I've even broken it down into advanced, basic, and client. So I can have views for someone who's a client, views for someone who's maybe less proficient on a computer would have a basic view. And then I've got the industry-specific stuff there as well. So you can get into, I think it's important to get into understanding what your preferences are as far as organizing your files. It will make things much easier for you. And then in scripts, I should actually show you this. So my main view that when I did the diagram page is actually a component called app. So this is my most base level component right here. And I've got two files. I've got app private and app public. And what these are is these are my generic namespace specified whatever. So you can see here I've got some variables that I'm specifying. But what I did, you need to break up your JavaScript files so they make sense. At my registration page, there's a lot of variables I don't need because they're not logged in. So I've embedded this app.public or apppublic.js into my index page. So when you go into Studio, I'm sure you probably know this, or I'm in Studio. What am I doing? So we go to index. Right here is where you embed JavaScript files. Okay, so you can see I've embedded app public here. Once they've logged in, this component, the app component, is loaded. So this is actually the more substantial JavaScript file. I don't load it until that component's in. Okay, so in here I've got initialize their settings. I've got a lot of strings, for instance. So these are strings that I don't want in my code. So I've mapped them all to different variables. And I think that, so this is when I was saying about components and they have different benefits. Here I'm actually creating my app and making it more lightweight by embedding my JavaScript intelligently. Does anyone know what time do I finish up here? 10:15. Okay, I'm going to go fast then. Let's do some more. Okay, here we are. What do we have? Okay, know where to embed your files. That's what I just went through. Dealing with strings. Okay, here's a quick example of how I deal with strings. So here's some examples when you might want to put your strings into a variable and use them that way, in my opinion. Probably someone's going to tell me I'm all wrong here afterwards. But when I'm using a widget that's used everywhere, to me, the ID is a good place to replace it with a variable. So here I'm doing the bad way would be to embed the common widget string into your code. Instead, put it in a variable because perhaps you want to rename common widget. The second way, you do it in one place. The first way, you have to find it everywhere in your application. And maybe it has a good find and replace function, but I think it's easier to do it just do it the good way from the beginning. Another example would be, again, in the dialogue, your messages. You can create a multilingual system by using variables and filling your hard-coded, where you might just type in a string, put a variable there instead, and start creating a map file where you're keeping all of these strings. And then the last one that I think is probably most important is when you're loading components. Personally, I'm early in my stages of development. I don't know how my style how my style is going to change. If I want to rearrange my component file structure, this gives me total flexibility to do it with very little work. Authentication. If I have time, I'll show you the script. I initially started with a hybrid approach because I was afraid of keeping my usernames and passwords in my own data class. So previously, I used to have a user data store class, and I would mirror it to the directory. And that was a way for me to get away from that fear. This time around, I went fully to a custom login. And it is by far worth investing in learning how to do it. It's not really complicated, but it gives you a really dynamic way of authenticating your users. For instance, I've got a concept where if a realtor is going on holidays, what they want to do is they want to hand off their business to someone for 2 weeks because their client's needs still addressed. So I've created what I call a shadow user. And I actually log in as the proper user, but I'm able to attach an access level. So if you're going on holidays and you want to say, okay, you're taking over, but you only assign them read access. Okay, they get to see everything in your database, and this was only possible through authentication. The other thing was, and I don't know if this has changed or it will change, but currently, from what I know, to change the username with a directory entry, you have to change the password as well, which wasn't intuitive to me, and that was part of the reason I went to a fully custom login. You can track stats like how many times they're logging in. You can check for abuse on logins. You know, someone's been hitting the login 20 times in 10 minutes. I got to shut that down. Okay, trickle down. This has to do with extended data store classes. And I'm going to show you how this works. I've got a project here. So if we take an extended data store class model, what I've got here is basically a really basic model. I've got a contact and then the user contact, which I'm going to restrict to that user account. So user contact extends contact. And then these two different types of users, which I'm going to restrict in a different way, client and vendor, extend user contact. So I've got 3 levels of inheritance here. It makes sense. We've got a stamp here, created at, modified at. It makes sense to create that functionality in the base level. Why rewrite it for each derived class? So right now, events such as onInit, onValidate, they don't trickle down. So if you were to write to the client, you were to create a new client, it will do the onInit for the client class, but it will not do it for the user contact and the contact. The one that does do it is on restricting query because it makes sense. But I wanted to mimic that functionality. So here's how I did it. So if I go into, I'll just go to this dev test. So this is going to be server side. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to put into the variable test a new client. And you can see it's going to go through my model here. I've got client, contact. So we'll start at the top, which is client. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got the on-init event, and I'm going to run this. I've got debuggers at all the proper points, so I'll walk you through it. So if we run this, you can see the first place, it's going to do a login thing. Hold on, try that again. Okay, this is from my other application. I'm not logged in, so it's giving me a problem. Okay, here we are starting. So let me blow this up. So the first place it hits is the on-init of the client, which is what it should do. And what I'm going to do is immediately, I can do some processing here before it passes it down to the user contact, but I'm going to call a method that I wrote in user contact called on-init. It's not the event, it's a method, and I'm going to pass this entity down. So the next place it should fire is in one level below, the user contact. So now we're in the user contact method that I wrote. I'm able to make adjustments to the user contact level, so any common functions in that level, I process here. And then I'm going to call the next level down and pass that same entity that came in. You can see the incoming parameter, and I'm going to use that and pass it down another level. Now we're into the base contact. That's where I set the stamps. So now I've got these stamps being set at the base level. I'm not doing it at each end level. And now I'm going to go back up. I'll return a value from the base level. So now it's hitting the debugger afterwards in the user contact level. And you can see the result. I've got the result coming up. And then the next level is in the client level. So what it does, it basically starts from the top, trickles down, trickles up. And you can process before or after. And this really allows you to take advantage of what inheritance is really for. Inheritance, a big benefit is so that you're not rewriting your code in multiple places. So I just thought that was one useful thing that I did. Let's see where we're going here. Okay. A consistent, efficient UI. I think I'm going to skip that for now. It's rather complex. I can show you quickly. If I run out of time, I run out of time. So if I go back into Wakanda Studio, I'm going to show you how I set up the dialogues. Where am I here? Okay, so I'll go into my web folder. One of the places I used a lot of form validation was in, I'm in the wrong project. So I'll go back into the big one, go into the components, and go into manage users. I'll go into the JavaScript here. I think this one's probably maybe going to take too long to cover. I'm going to move on. There's something better I want to show you, if that's okay. Okay, so I can show you basically what I'm doing with the dialogues is I've created a generic dialogue, and from a place I want to call, I actually call a common method, and I send it parameters for what strings are going to be in there, and I also specify a function that I want it to call in the original component when it's done. What I'll do is, this is probably a good one for me to post on the forum later on, because it's going to take me too long to explain. Large form validation, I spent a lot of time on this, and this is what I want to explain to you, because this is what I'm going to open source. When you're validating a form, it's very wise to validate on the client side for instant user feedback, but never only on the client, of course. You want to duplicate all of that validation and more on the server side. But for user response, client-side validation is very important. So I invested the time in creating a generic system. Now, I was talking to Laurent. Tons of this probably gets taken care of by Wakanda soon. But it was a good exercise for me, and I don't have to wait for anything now. So I created this wacklib.validate. And I'm going to actually do some examples here. So we'll go to the registration page. Let's log out here. I'm going to bring up the console. We're going to validate this form. I'm going to show you how it works. So all you're doing, I combined this validation library with the client-side event system and put it into one file, and that's what I'm going to open source. And I'm going to write up how to use it. So in here, I've got some prepared code. It's in notes. I'm pretty sure. There we are. Okay. So, the first thing I'm going to do, I have some just really basic utility functions. I have one console. Okay. I have one that just makes a full name. So you can put in first name, last name, a spouse or partner, sorry to be politically correct, and it will assemble it based on whether the last names are the same, first names are the same. So I've got a few little quick utility functions, one for generating a random number between this and this, because I was doing it all the time. If you find you're doing things all the time, that's a good case for you to put it in a library. And these little libraries, maybe you have one that you include in every one of your projects, and it gives you a head start. So that's sort of some things that are included in the library. But this is the validation part of it. So in this little bit of code, and can you see that? Probably not. So I can probably put that in Studio. This is the command I'm going to run. I'll put it in here so we can see it. Okay, so I'm going to run that in the console. So what it's going to do, it's calling the namespace wacklib.validate.hasValue. So all it's checking is if it's blank. Now you could do that more quickly in just using Wakanda and a little JavaScript, but I got to start somewhere. And what it does is it returns an object that says it's empty. I was checking the password field. It applied the style to it. So you've got a problem. That's easy. You could do that by just applying some CSS. But let's get a little more tricky. So I've got a function in there for reverting the style. So what it does is it actually captures the CSS, the inline CSS that was there, and will revert it. So what we're going to do is revert the styles on that last thing that we did. So I'm going to put that line in, and it just takes out the CSS. The next one here, we're going to go a little fancier, and I'm going to, I guess you can read it right here. So we're going to do a length function, and we're going to take the same password, and we're going to check it between, we're going to actually check two fields. I'm passing in an array. We're going to pass two fields, and we're going to check them both for the length between 6 and 20 characters. So if I take that line, and we run that in the browser, what we get now is we get back two objects telling you, did they fail or did they pass? And then the first element's getting a group message. So now you can get a validation status for those two items together. And that's going to parlay into, let me just clear the styles. Okay, so the next one, okay, I've got settings. So you can set what you want for your style on your different fields here. So I'm going to do I'm going to do this here. I'm going to set the background. I've already got set in my code. I've created the red border. That I specified as a setting. So now I'm going to add to my settings. I'm going to do a light yellow background. And I'll assign that. And then we'll do the same validation we did before. So now I've got validation with the styling. So you can specify and be more flexible with what your errors look like. And then you can do an entire form. So this is the script sanitized for the console. This is the script to validate the whole form. So to validate that whole form is a lot of JavaScript if you were to just hand bomb it for the one form. So what I've got here is I'm going to pass in these bunch of widgets to make sure they're not empty. And then I'm going to pass in the password, and I'm going to do a length method on it, which is going to check for a maximum length of the password. You probably see these all the time. Then I'm going to do an equal one between the password and the confirmation. So in this call here, I'm going to validate the whole form with that one section of code. So if we go back, I'll paste that in. You can see here now, I've gotten back an object for each element. So I can check the status of each element, because it's got a reference to the original widget that it was applied to. And the first element will always carry a status. So this one has a status for the group of that call, as well as the entire form. And that's how it works. So it's now I've got a library that I know how to use. You probably don't know how to use it because that was really quick. But I'm going to document it. I have a personal library that I'm going to be doing a lot of form validation in my application. So I spent some time and wrote it generically and made it in a way that it's quick, it's efficient, and now I can reuse it. So that's, I think one of the things I want to impart on you is I'm going to put this on GitHub. I'm not a super open source guy that's got a lot of experience with this, but you're welcome to make improvements to it. You're welcome to use it. And I would encourage you to start making your utility library and make those available to me. Save me some time like I'm hoping to save you some time. So that's the library. And I think that it's important for that type of thing to happen. See where we're at here with the presentation. Okay, I did that. So build your own library. Helpful tips. Okay. I'm going to get into what I discover on deployment in Europe. But here's something I discovered. Does anyone use Dropbox? I found Dropbox was great for stupid people like me. Because I use Git, and I try and commit a lot. But there's a few times where I didn't because I forgot. And Dropbox has a great little feature called Get Previous Versions. And it saved my butt a lot of times. So I would say I've been developing with my actual solution folder in Dropbox for a while, and I've not run into any problems as far as corrupting things. I would say try it. It saved me a lot of time. I would learn Git, and I would commit every time you say to yourself, I don't remember what I did last. As soon as you're starting to forget your sequence of programming, put a line in, remind yourself, and you can bring up a log, and you can get back to it real quickly. And I would say start contributing to the community. I read my own posts the most. It's my personal library. So when I come up with a great idea or what I think is a great idea, I put it in the community. And I go back and I reference my own screencasts. That's the sick part. Because I don't, it leaves my brain. So I would say, that's something you should do, is start using the community. Not only, don't think you're being a good Samaritan, use it as your own reference. And it's a great resource to start brainstorming. I've talked to a lot of people here. I think we've got a good little nucleus of a community going, but I think we need to take it to the next level. So that's basically my presentation. I know it's a little scatterbrained, and I knew it was going to be that. I listened to the guy yesterday who was saying, just sort of leave it. If it's broken in a browser and it doesn't look quite right, so what? So that's the approach I took was, if I don't look real polished, that's good. But I wanted to share with you sort of my experience thus far. In Paris, I'll be covering more widgety UI, glitzy stuff, and it'll be recorded, so I want you to watch that as well. So I'm going to open it up for questions if anyone has questions.